The observation. Observer Thalax stood motionless before the vast viewing screen, four eyes fixed on the blue-green planet below. Earth, as its inhabitants called it, appeared to be facing its final days. Yet the humans remained unaware. From his position aboard the cloaked Galactic Confederation observation vessel Vigilant, he watched their civilization continue its daily rhythm, oblivious to the gamma-ray burst heading toward their solar system, its deadly radiation set to sterilize their world in less than 2 weeks. They still show no signs of detecting the approaching radiation front. Thalax noted in his daily report, the words materializing in glowing script before him. Their astronomical detection systems remain insufficient for early warnings of this nature. Behind him, the gentle hum of the observation deck's quantum processors provided a familiar backdrop to his work. The Confederation High Council had stationed him here 6 Earth months ago, tasked with documenting what they believed would be humanity's final chapter. It wasn't the first time they'd watched a species face extinction. The Confederation's prime directive remained absolute. Observe, record, but never interfere with the natural development, or end, of any civilization. This was considered the highest ethical standard for advanced species. But something about these humans troubled Thalax. They were different from other species he'd observed. Their technology was rudimentary, certainly, barely a Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale, but their spirit was unlike anything in the Confederation's extensive records. A flash of movement caught his attention as Earth's largest space telescope altered its position, its gold-plated mirrors capturing light from distant stars. Inside the control center below, Dr. Elena Kaveri worked tirelessly, though her efforts would soon prove futile. Dr. Kaveri floated through the space telescope's maintenance corridor, her experienced eyes scanning the readouts from their latest deep space observations. 15 years of astronomical research had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, her instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The background radiation patterns had been increasingly unusual lately, showing anomalies that didn't match any known cosmic phenomena. "Houston, this is Kaveri," she spoke into her comm unit. "Are you seeing these readings from Sector 478b? "Affirmative, Doctor," came the response, slightly distorted. "Our team is analyzing the data now." Kaveri pushed herself toward the observation console, her movements practiced and efficient in the microgravity environment. Earth hung below, peaceful and blue. Her family was down there, her daughter just starting university, studying astronomy like her mother. The static in her comm unit suddenly increased. Kaveri frowned. The telescope's communication systems rarely experienced interference at this level. As she adjusted the frequency, something caught her eye through the viewport. For just a moment, she thought she saw a shimmer in space, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. But that was impossible in the vacuum of space, unless... Aboard the Vigilant, alarms blared to life. "Warning. Detection risk elevated," announced the ship's eye. "Human observation equipment has registered anomalous readings in proximity to our position." "Impossible," First Officer Cyril called from his station. "Their technology is far too primitive to detect our quantum displacement field." Thalax wasn't so sure. He'd learned not to underestimate these humans. They had a habit of surprising him. He watched as Dr. Kaveri moved closer to the viewport, her eyes scanning the exact spot where their vessel hung in space. The Council's communication channel suddenly activated, a holographic projection materializing before him. The imposing figure of High Counselor Vormak, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the Council chamber's lights. "Observer First Class Thalax." Vormak's voice resonated with authority. "Report to emergency session immediately." In the Council's virtual chamber, 7 figures surrounded Thalax, their forms shifting like liquid glass, a sign of their agitation. "The gamma-ray burst approaches faster than predicted," Vormak announced, his tone grave. "The human species has perhaps 10 Earth days before the radiation front reaches their system. Their atmosphere will begin breaking down within hours of impact. They deserve a chance to save themselves." Thalax argued, aware he was breaching protocol. If we simply warned them, our laws are absolute. Counselor Zephyr cut in sharply. We observe, we document, we do not interfere. This is the natural order. There is nothing natural about standing idle while billions die. Thalax's outburst echoed in the chamber. The council members rippled with disapproval. Back at the space telescope, Dr. Kaveri was now certain something was wrong. The anomalous readings were increasing, and the strange radiation patterns were reaching levels she'd never seen before. She needed to warn Earth, but first, she turned back to the viewport, staring into the seemingly empty space where she'd seen the shimmer. "Whoever you are," she whispered, "if you're out there, we could use some help." Thalax watched the human scientist with growing respect and dread. Kaveri was close, too close to discovering their presence, and the gamma-ray burst was bearing down on them all, its deadly power building with every passing hour. The choice before him seemed impossible: obey the council and watch humanity burn, or break the most sacred law of his people and give these remarkable beings a fighting chance. In the vast silence of space, time was running out for them all. Dr. Maya Chen stared at her computer screen, her coffee long forgotten beside her keyboard. The data didn't make sense. As head of Earth's Anomalous Astronomical Phenomena Division, she had seen every type of cosmic event imaginable. But this was different. This was wrong. "Run it again," she told her computer system. Outside her window, the Geneva Research Facility hummed with activity. Scientists from around the world had been arriving for days now, drawn by the same troubling readings. Above Earth's atmosphere, Thalax made his decision. He couldn't stand by and watch billions die. His fingers moved across the holographic controls, preparing a small observer pod for launch. "Observer Thalax." Xyrl's voice came from behind him. "The Council forbids this action." "The Council isn't here," Thalax replied without turning around. "They don't see what we see. These humans, they're different. They deserve a chance." The pod dropped from the cloaked vessel, its own stealth systems engage. Thalax guided it through Earth's atmosphere, aiming for the cluster of research facilities in Geneva. If anyone could help him save this species, it would be their scientists. At the space telescope, Dr. Kaveri had spent hours analyzing the strange readings. The shimmer she'd seen hadn't appeared again, but she was now sure they were being watched. She'd sent her findings to Earth in a heavily encrypted transmission marked for Dr. Chen's eyes only. The morning sun was just touching the Alps when Maya noticed movement outside her office window. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, a ripple in the air like a heat wave. But it was too cold for heat waves. The ripple moved closer to her window. Maya stood slowly, her heart pounding. The air seemed to fold in on itself, and suddenly there was something there, someone. Thalax had never revealed himself to humans before. The protective field around his body that helped him breathe in Earth's atmosphere gave him a slight shimmer. He raised his four-fingered hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. To his surprise, Dr. Chen didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply walked to her office door, opened it, and said, "I assume you're here about the radiation anomalies." Within an hour, Maya's office had become the site of first contact. She called in only her most trusted team members, and they worked quickly to understand what Thalax was telling them. The news was worse than they'd imagined. "The gamma-ray burst will destroy your atmosphere," Thalax explained, using a small device to project a model of the coming disaster. "Your planet has perhaps 9 days before the radiation front hits. The Council, my people, they believe it's best to let nature take its course." "But you don't agree," Maya said. "It wasn't a question. I've watched your species. You don't give up. You don't accept defeat. Even now, your scientists work together, sharing information across borders that usually divide you. It's remarkable." A knock at the door made them all jump. Dr. Kaveri entered, still in her flight suit. She'd made an emergency return from the space telescope after seeing Maya's response to her encrypted message. "So," she said, looking at Thalax, Our hidden neighbor finally shows himself. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Despite the Council's rules, Thalax shared what he knew about radiation shielding technology. The humans absorbed the information quickly, their minds already racing to adapt it to their own capabilities. "We'll need every major research facility working on this," Maya said, sending out urgent messages to her colleagues worldwide. "And we'll need governments to cooperate in ways they never have before." "They won't believe us," one of her team members worried. Just then, Thalax's communication device lit up with an angry red glow. The Council had discovered his unauthorized descent. Their voices filled the room, speaking in their crystalline language. "Observer Thalax, you have violated our highest law. Return to the vessel immediately." Thalax looked at the humans around him, at their determination, their refusal to accept defeat. He made his second major decision of the day. "No," he said simply, and turned off the device. The race to save Earth had begun, and they would need every second they could get. The defiance. The first press conference was chaos. When Dr. Chen and Dr. Kaveri stood before the world's media to announce both the existence of an alien observer and the impending gamma-ray apocalypse, the initial response was predictable: disbelief, accusations of hoax, and outright panic. Thalax remained hidden, watching from behind a one-way screen. The Council's punishment for his betrayal would be severe, but as he observed the humans rallying in the face of extinction, he found he didn't regret his choice. "We have 9 days," Maya told the stunned reporters. 9 days to implement a planetary defense system using technology we've never seen before. And we will need everyone, every nation, every scientist, every resource, working together. Within hours, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. For perhaps the first time in human history, political differences were set aside in the face of mutual extinction. The recordings of Thalax and his warnings, along with the astronomical data confirming the approaching gamma-ray burst, left little room for doubt. "This is not a drill," the Secretary General announced to the world. "This is not a hoax. This is humanity's greatest challenge, and we will face it together." Across the globe, people reacted differently. Some panicked, rushing to bunkers or attempting to flee to remote locations. Others turned to prayer or found comfort in fatalism. But most, surprisingly to Thalax, simply asked, "How can I help?" In laboratories and research centers worldwide, scientists worked around the clock to understand and implement the alien shielding technology. Military facilities repurposed missile defense systems. Space agencies prepared their satellites for reconfiguration. Commander Liu Wei of the Chinese Space Agency supervised as technicians converted a communications satellite into part of what would become Earth's first planetary defense grid. "Faster," he urged them. "Every minute counts." In Moscow, Dr. Anastasia Petrova, leading expert in atmospheric physics, ran simulation after simulation. "It could work," she muttered, watching the holographic projection of Earth wrapped in a thin blue shield. "It actually might work." At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, engineers modified the software for every satellite in Earth's orbit, creating a network that could coordinate the planetary shield. "We've never attempted anything remotely like this," the lead programmer said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "But then, we've never had alien tech before." 7 days until impact. In his temporary quarters at the Geneva facility, Thalax received the message he'd been dreading. The holographic image of High Counselor Vormak materialized before him, towering and severe. "You have betrayed everything our civilization stands for." Vormak's voice was cold as deep space. "The natural order must be preserved. You have been excommunicated from the Confederation. The Vigilant has been ordered to leave Earth's orbit. You will remain with the humans and share their fate." Thalax had expected this, but the pronouncement still struck him like a physical blow. He would never see his homeworld again. Never again walk under the triple moons of Salanthea. "I understand, High Counselor," he replied formally. "And I accept my fate." What Vormak didn't realize, what Thalax himself was only beginning to understand, was that living among these humans, even for a few days, had changed him. Their indomitable will in the face of almost certain doom had awakened something in him that centuries of Confederation conditioning had suppressed. 5 days until impact. The Global Shield Project, now codenamed Aegis, had progressed beyond anyone's expectations. Using Thalax's knowledge as a foundation, human scientists had created something new, a hybrid technology that combined alien principles with human ingenuity. Your people would have built the shield using quantum displacement fields, Dr. Kaveri explained to Thalax as they reviewed the plans. We can't replicate that exactly, but we can create a ionospheric resonance grid that achieves the same effect, using all our satellites and ground stations working in concert. Thalax studied the design with growing amazement. This is not how we would have done it, he admitted. It's simpler, yes, but also more elegant. It might actually work better for your specific atmosphere. The recognition stunned him. The Confederation had always assumed their way was superior, that less advanced species had nothing to teach them. Yet here was evidence to the contrary. 3 days until impact. The shield was nearly ready, but problems were emerging. Power grids worldwide were straining under the enormous energy demands of the Aegis system. Blackouts rippled across continents as resources were diverted to the shield generators. In the darkness, something beautiful happened. Communities came together. Neighbors checked on neighbors. Strangers helped strangers. In the face of extinction, humanity was showing its best self. In New Delhi, people gathered in darkened streets, sharing food and stories. In Rio de Janeiro, musicians played by candlelight as technicians worked to reroute power. In rural Kenya, villagers pooled fuel to keep the local shield relay station running. Thalax observed it all with growing wonder. The Confederation had records of thousands of civilizations facing extinction events. None had responded like this, with such unity, such determination, such humanity. 1 day until impact. The shield was operational but untested. No one knew if it would withstand the full force of a gamma-ray burst. Everyone on Earth, from presidents to prisoners, held their breath. In the final hours, Dr. Chen found Thalax standing alone on the facility's roof, gazing at the stars. Your people are still watching, aren't they? She asked, joining him. Yes, Thalax confirmed. The Vigilant remains at the edge of your solar system. They believe they are witnessing your species' final moments. Well, Maya said with a grim smile, let's give them a show they won't forget. As they stood there, a notification chimed on Maya's tablet. She read it, then looked up at Thalax with wide eyes. The Vigilant is not alone, she said. Our deep space telescopes are picking up multiple vessels arriving at the edge of the solar system. Hundreds of them. Thalax felt a surge of emotion he couldn't immediately identify. The Council, he whispered. They've come to witness. But why so many? The answer came minutes later. His personal communicator, silent since his excommunication, suddenly activated. The holographic image that appeared wasn't Vormak, but Zephyr, historically the strongest advocate for non-interference. Observer Thalax. Zephyr's tone was different now, less imperious, more uncertain. The Council has been deliberating. We have been monitoring the human response to the crisis. Their unified effort is unprecedented in our records. Thalax waited, hardly daring to hope. A vote has been taken, Zephyr continued. While we cannot directly intervene, as that would violate our most sacred principle, we have determined that providing observational data on the approaching radiation front would not constitute direct interference. Thalax struggled to contain his emotion. This was as close to help as the Confederation had ever offered any species. The data is being transmitted now, Zephyr concluded. We will continue to observe. The transmission ended, and Thalax turned to Maya, who had heard everything. What does this mean? She asked. It means, Thalax said, that my people are beginning to change. and it means your shield will have the exact frequencies needed to counteract the gamma radiation. The data from the Confederation vessels was immediately incorporated into the Aegis system. The shield's effectiveness doubled overnight. 0 hour. The gamma-ray burst hit Earth's shield at precisely 3:47 UTC. Around the world, people watched their skies turn an eerie purple as the invisible radiation collided with the planetary defense system. The shield glowed with unearthly light, bending and flexing but holding. In Geneva, Maya and her team monitored the shield's integrity. Power fluctuations in the North American sector, someone called out, redirecting energy from Asian grid to compensate. For 6 hours, the radiation battered Earth's defenses. For 6 hours, the shield held, bending but never breaking, straining but never failing. And then, finally, the worst was over. As the radiation levels began to decrease, cheers erupted in control rooms around the world. People embraced, wept, celebrated in the streets. Humanity had faced extinction and refused to succumb. On the roof of the Geneva facility, Thalax received one final communication from the Confederation. The Council has witnessed something remarkable today, Vormak himself declared, his tone solemn. A species that, by all our predictions, should have fractured and failed in the face of extinction. Instead, they united and prevailed. This requires further study. There was a pause before Vormak continued. Your exile is rescinded, Observer Thalax. You may return to the Confederation. However, another pause. If you wish to remain as our first official ambassador to Earth, the Council would not object. After the communication ended, Maya joined Thalax on the roof. The sky was returning to its normal blue, the shield now invisible but still functioning. What will you do now? She asked. Thalax gazed out at the world that had been saved, not just by his intervention, but by humanity's own unbreakable spirit. I think, he said slowly, I would like to stay and learn more about your species. There is clearly much the Confederation has to learn from humanity. Below them, Earth continued to turn, its people forever changed by the knowledge that they were not alone in the universe, and by the discovery of their own capacity for unity in the face of oblivion. In the vast darkness of space, the Confederation vessels lingered, their observers watching with new respect for the tiny blue planet and its remarkably resilient inhabitants. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and emerged not just surviving, but triumphant. And the galaxy had noticed.